Layovers, your weekly dose of aviation innovation.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard from the flight deck. This is Paul Dimitria, and this is Alex Hunter. We'll be the pilots for this podcast about the news, the startups, and the technologies defining the modern air travel experience. Flight time today, 1 hour and 38 minutes, and we expect an on-time arrival. Coming up on this flight is the economy cabin getting more cramped. Emirates introduced A380s without a first class. Angry Birds lands in your flight. Narita uses a running truck instead of airport signage, which U.S. airline tops customer satisfaction for a third year in a row, and a crazy story of an airport staff who got stuck in the cargo of a flying plane. As we reach our cruising altitude, I'm going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's turn on those noise-canceling headphones.
This is Flight 11 to Saint-Martin. Hi, Alex.
Hi, or Saint Martin, as we ruin everything in English. We take the sexiness out of it.
Yeah, well, we're going for a more exotic airport for once. Again, by the way, because last week was Amsterdam, so it's again a KLM destination because a Dutch airport, basically. We'll tell you all about it at the end. Why we chose that airport? First of all, because we wanted to do something a bit different than the big city, and you'll see as well why. Because we were going to talk about crazy runways, and that's going to be Alex telling us about what he thinks are the most crazy runways in the world. I'm very, very much looking forward to that one, actually.
Yeah, it should be a fun session. There was a very, very long list to choose from, so it took a while to cull them into a list that's not going to take up an entire show by itself.
Yeah, well, exactly. And also, we're going to talk a lot about aircrafts today because it's been a while we haven't talked about aircrafts and a lot about seats. There's a reason why you'll see that later. That's going to be the main topic of the show as well. So we thought that, holiday destination is where you see a lot of aircrafts and you're always cramped in an eco seat when you go on holidays. So first news of the week. The news of the week, the first one is that's, our saga. We could rename the show the U.S. subsidies or something.
Yeah, U.S. subsidies weekly.
Exactly.
I don't think a lot of people would listen to that.
No, I'm not sure either. So I had quoted in episode 007, I had quoted a number of 150 billion subsidies that U.S. airlines have had received since the beginning of the century, the past century. And I couldn't remember when I had found that number because I remember I had read it somewhere. And apparently it comes from WikiLeaks. Can you maybe just tell us what WikiLeaks is, Alex? You're the smart guy.
WikiLeaks is this. Yeah. Something like that. WikiLeaks is this sort of ongoing nebulous organization that has, by hook or by crook, come across a lot of diplomatic wires that they have been periodically releasing for, since I think 2007. Their figurehead is Julian Assange, who is currently holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London and has been for years because he's there's a warrant out for his arrest on another charge in Sweden. But they have all of these diplomatic wires and documents and various other bits and pieces which they use to their advantage for leverage or because they feel like the public needs to know. And this gem was hidden among them.
Yeah, apparently it was a document that was disclosed already back in 2009, which stated how U.S. aviation, including commercial airlines, obviously the FAA, the airports, received 155 billion in federal direct spending from 1918 to 1998. I say that because obviously 1998 means that we're not even talking about what we talked in an earlier episode where we discussed about the saga about all the other stuff that the U.S. airlines have received since then, especially after 9/11, obviously. So it created quite a stir. And actually, this document, not only it was the reason I remembered, it's actually the Business Travel Coalition, which is basically sides on the side of keeping the Open Skies Agreement open. They have used it as a way to basically pressure the U.S. airline. They say, and I'm going to quote, that's the chairman of this Business Travel Coalition. It's a central argument of some U.S. airlines seeking government protection from foreign competition is that the Persian Gulf states have been inappropriately and unfairly helping the Gulf carriers become established with financial aid. What this report shines a bright light on is a simple fact that government assistance has long been provided on a very large scale to airlines all around the world, including in the U.S. We've been both saying that basically.
Yeah,
right?
it's a very tersely worded response, referring to the fiction that U.S. airlines cartel and referring to them as a cartel in the first place. That's a very pejorative word. It's about subsidies, and this is a union affiliated, a big union affiliated organization, and they've come out against the U.S. carriers saying, "You guys, we told you this was going to happen," and they produced a number that said. This is a separate union that said U.S. airlines receive state subsidies amounting to $1 billion a year currently, which is, again, and I've been saying this, and we've been saying this since the beginning. How did they think this was going to work?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, American Airlines, when they wanted to basically restructure, they basically put out $8 billion worth of pension plans to a federal body. So basically, although that was not $8 billion they received, they offloaded $8 billion to the federal state in the U.S. So basically, again, like you say, it's a very convoluted story. I'm just gonna read what the spokesperson for the Partnership for Open and Fair Skies. I always love saying that name. She said, calling FAA funding a subsidy for commercial airlines is akin to calling paved roads and traffic lights a subsidy for the taxi industry. I mean,
that's specious reasoning.
It makes sense, but yeah, look, this is exactly what you and me have been saying. Yes, of course, we understand that, part of the subsidy was to build airports, but when you look at what actually they're currently doing in the Middle East, they are building infrastructure. They're building airports, they're building an industry. So you cannot say it's that different.
And taxis are not the only users of airports.
Yes.
So it's a totally invalid argument, and I think it really shows them grasping at straws. This is like death blow after death blow. And the hilarious thing is, like we've been saying week after week, the Middle Eastern carriers are launching more and more capacity to the U.S. because they know that they've won this fight.
Yes. Actually, there was an article. I will say, to be fair to the U.S. airlines, it was an article. I don't remember now the name of the person who wrote it, but I put it in the links in the notes of the show, obviously. Who said that, of course, you have to remember that U.S. airlines and passengers, through the taxes they pay with the ticket, pay something to the FAA, and they paid, according to his calculation, almost $250 billion back to the FAA. So what he says there is the U.S. airlines are paying back, but they're getting them subsidies. Well, fair enough. But the point remains that basically this is something that happens everywhere in the world, where you have tax for airport duty, passenger duty in the UK. This is a system that exists everywhere. It's not, so you cannot just separate the two. We all, in every country in the world, in every airport in the world, you have a system of paying back, of paying landing fees, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very hard to actually make. Here, what we're saying, Alex and I, is not that the U.S. airline is just crooks. We're not really. But we're saying that the system in a whole is, at one point, you create an infrastructure. The state, the government, the states, the nation, the kingdom, whoever steps in to help create that infrastructure. And then there's this system of state aid and subsidies on one side, which now are considered more and more unfair. And on the other side, you have taxes. And that's actually okay. So the point is, how, and this is exactly what you just said, how could they believe, the U.S. airlines, that they would not be called out on that? That, we are the only ones not getting any subsidies, and we are we have the best system in the world. That's actually not true.
No, absolutely. And and further to your point, I certainly don't want to come off as, anti-U.S. airlines or in any way. If the tables were turned and the facts were turned, I would be going after whoever was wrong. My problem is anti-competitive behavior.
Yeah,
settle it on the playing field with product and service, and not with this nonsense.
Yeah, correct. And I understand. It's true that it's very hard to make a full argument here, because comparing what happened in the US or in Europe, basically 50 to 80 years ago to what happens in the last 20 years, it's very hard because you're comparing orange to apple. The world is going faster. It's true that infrastructure is being built much faster, but because the world is actually going faster, so it's not as if. So it's a muddled situation that we'll be covering. Actually, if you want to, I mean, you're an American citizen, Alex, so you could do that. The Obama administration just opened an open forum when you can share your views online. You can submit your views. So if you want to submit any of your views, you can. Anyone who listens, I think it's only open for U.S. citizens or maybe residents. I'm not sure. It's found on regulations.gov. To be very honest, I went on it. It's not the best UX website I've ever seen. It's very hard to find where I should put it.
A government website has bad UX? I don't believe you, Paul.
But you can actually submit your view, so it's an ongoing process. Talking about that, at the same time of all this happened, Tim Clark, so the CEO of Emirates, was in Copenhagen, and he said he called the report spurious, salacious, and malicious. So he's not very happy. And he stated that the bilateral agreements like Open Skies exist between a lot of different countries, obviously the US and the Gulf, but also separately, not the EU as an entity, but separate states in the EU have these kind of agreements. And he called them, they are free and open, and they're a sign of moving away from a Jurassic era of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Wow. And that's quite aggressive for him, because he's usually the calm voice in the storm. So he must be losing his patience.
Yes. So what was he in Copenhagen, Alex?
Well, he was in Copenhagen to announce that Emirates were increasing capacity to Copenhagen from Dubai. Now, that in and of itself isn't huge news. But what's interesting about this is they're moving from a 777 to a 380. Also, not hugely interesting. But it's the configuration of this A380 that is interesting. They are moving from a 3-class configuration in the A380 to a 2-class. And what that means is there will be 615 seats on this business and economy configured airplane, which is a staggering amount.
Yeah, I think currently the 3-class configuration has a 517.
517.
So that's a big increase.
And that's the most of any carrier today.
Currently, yeah.
So they're
I think. Do you remember what's the maximum capacity of the A380 in full economy? I think it was
853.
853.
853 is the maximum single class layout that the A380 can accommodate, and no one has come anywhere close to that. Air Austral, when they delivered the specification to Airbus for their A380, it was 840, but they haven't actually converted those orders to firm deliveries. And Transaero are having one with 652 seats, but those have not been delivered yet either. So currently, this 615 seat A380 flight from Dubai to Copenhagen will be the single largest configuration. And also, as you pointed out last week in an offline conversation, it could signal a slight shift in strategy for Emirates.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've taken Emirates in a 2-class configuration, never an A380, obviously. But so I remember when I was flying to and from Manila to Dubai, so Manila in the Philippines, there were never a first class. And the same was from Kochi, which is a city in the south of India. I also didn't see a first class. So it's not new that they don't do first class. What is new is that I think for a very long time, they really pushed, like all the Middle Eastern airlines, they pushed this kind of image of elegance and your premium product. And they always displayed what they do in the front of the cabin. And especially with A380, with the showers in front and everything. So actually moving away from that to removing that bit, which probably makes sense economically, right? I'm sure they actually make sense. And I'm going to say that because, for instance, I used to travel a lot between Dubai and Osaka in Japan. And Dubai and Osaka, it was a 777-200 extended range. It always had the first class, but it was always, and I'm not kidding, always empty. Actually got, thank you Emirates, by the way, I got upgraded a few times there because it was empty. So you can realize that maybe there's a limit at which point you say, okay, we got to do something for our image. And at the end of the day, you also want to do, have full capacity. So you just remove a class, right?
Now they're optimizing that image with revenue, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Exactly, and they're not the first one, because if you think, there are a lot of airlines that have removed first class. AA is abandoned. American Airlines has abandoned it. United is considering abandoning it. TAM in Brazil has let go of the first class. Lufthansa is actually removing the first class on many flights and not ordering a three class configuration for their following planes. Even Qatar Airways is actually removing first class seats and reserving, that's interesting, reserving the first class image for the A380. So that's going to be like the ultra premium products. We're going to be A380, and the rest might actually be less premium. I mean, less premium. Let's not kid ourselves. That's still very premium. But it's a shift in strategy. Well, the question I'm going to ask you, Alex, because maybe I don't know if you thought about this, is like, if you think about it, in that route from Dubai to Copenhagen, so now they have 615 seats on an A380, which we know has four engines, so supposedly is less fuel efficient than a 777, but a 777 only has maybe like 430 seats. So doesn't that suddenly make the A380 more efficient than a 777? Now that, I don't know. I'm just asking. I don't have the answer.
I don't think so. I think it comes down to cost per seat mile, right? So
Right.
you have to compare maximum takeoff weight and the amount of energy required to move that weight versus the passengers and the ticketing prices. It is so complicated, but I can't make that leap in my own mind. We really need to get someone on here whose job it is to work this stuff out.
Correct.
But
I agree.
I don't think so, because when you increase the number of passengers on the plane, you increase the weight, and thereby increases your cost. So I don't think it works like that. It might.
No, I'm not sure either. I'm not sure either.
There's a business reason. There's a business case for what Emirates have just announced. So, if they can squeeze more money per seat mile with this new configuration on this new route with an A380, then there's a solid reason why they've done it. I mean, those guys are the ultimate in route management and revenue management.
Yeah. By the way, I was reading, since I read French, I was reading a French newspaper called Les Echoes, in which the I think it was CEO of Airbus. I'm not exactly sure now, but the CEO of Airbus came and said they're still not sure about reconfiguring the A380 with new engines. So this is we know both that this is a very big demand from Emirates to say, we're going to order more Airbus A380s, but you have to provide us with more fuel efficient engines. So we'll see. They haven't made a decision yet, so they're not saying no. They also said that, you remember we said that a few weeks ago, that the A380 program will be breaking even this year. Still talking about planes, because we said today we're going to talk about aircrafts. We just talked about premium seating, and we know that premium seats are very expensive to build. I mean, there were articles back then, I don't know, there were that apparently the most premium seats cost more than $300,000. Yeah, it's crazy. You said, I think, because you had some experience in that a more normal premium, let's call it a business class seat with IFE costs like maybe $80K. So it's a lot of money.
It is.
And there's a glut. Actually, there's not. There was this piece of news that Boeing has put two of its 787s, so the Dreamliners, they put it in the Mojave Desert, where they all, the cemetery for planes, because they just don't have the premium seats ready. And there's a huge backlog. So they built for these configuration, they're working with a French company called Zodiac, which provides a lot of these very premium seats. For those of you who have been ever lucky to fly premium, you most likely have seated on a Zodiac seat. They don't have enough capacity. They don't have enough capacity in their factory to provide the seats. Pretty damning, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a good indicator of where the market is going, but it's interesting that they can't keep up with demand. I think that maybe it's time for them to have a competitor or someone who's already doing economy seats like Recaro to go into.
Maybe. Yeah,
but it's a totally different
dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the manufacturing of a high capacity, reasonably comfortable economy seat is completely different from manufacturing a business or first class suite. It's completely different set of expertise. So I don't think you can just go, oh, we're going to retool everything to go from economy to
of course
gigantic business class apartments.
I think we had posted a few months ago. There was Emirates did a video where they showed how they installed first class seats in
which
their
is super
planes.
interesting.
It's and you can see that it's very complicated.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Talking about 787s, you might remember that when Boeing started the program 70 of the Dreamliner, they started production, and the first planes that come out production, they were not still agreed by regulation, and they were at that time a slightly heavier than the products that came later. And it's been called for a long time the teens 787 because they belong to Boeing. So when the first orders came in, so for example, ANA, which was one of the launch customers, they said, okay, we're going to buy X number of A787. But then they realized that these first planes were a bit too heavy, and Boeing offered the possibility to ANA in that instance to say, okay, if you want to wait a little bit longer, we're going to give you a batch which is the lighter version. Boeing never actually disclosed what was the difference in weight, but it must have been quite something because ANA went with that second batch and not with the first batch. And for a very, very long time, the 787 were basically without any owners, right?
Which is, it's weird. And it really must have been a significant weight difference for ANA to push back the public launch of their 787 or the 787 in general, because they were the launch customers. So again, like you say, they haven't actually disclosed the weight difference, but it must have been absolutely huge for them to say, yeah, we'll take that significant delay to get these lighter airplanes.
And so now the news this week is that apparently there are rumors that 10 of these will have found customers. The two names that are being floated, and you just mentioned one is Air Austral, and the other one is, which is a French company to be for the French islands in Réunion in the Indian Ocean. And the other, I think it's Ethiopian. So
who are already a 787 operator.
Exactly. I have a slight idea that Boeing must have cut the price quite a lot on those being able to sell them. Yeah, right, big time. They say that this range of planes that's never been sold was worth the stock was worth more than $1 billion. So it's actually it's having $1 billion that sits there is not being used, is not being bought, is not fun for Boeing.
Yeah, you don't want that sitting on your books.
So that would also maybe reduce the backlog of Boeing, and also, of course, bring some money in for the program. So anyway, there's also a rumor that one of these terrible teens, that was the name, one of these terrible teens is actually being acquired by a VIP of unknown origin. So it could be.
We'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Exact. Still on Boeing, from 787 to 777. So 777 program. There will be an evolution of the 77 called currently the 777. X, which should appear. The first deliveries will appear in 2020. So that's not tomorrow. But in the meantime, to stay competitive, Boeing has announced that they will actually do some slight change to the current 777 to keep it, they want basically to keep the same number of planes being produced each month, which currently sits at 8.3. So there's basically 8 1/3 of a plane each month. And they want to, in order to maintain that, they want to be competitive. That's interesting because it shows that because that's the same thing with the A380 earlier, even though a plane is not is still in a production run, and the follow-up model or the evolutionary model is being announced, and with the competition, aircraft manufacturers have to improve, otherwise they're not getting. I mean, it's a very low margin business. So do you have anything to say about that one? Or
well, I just wonder if Boeing knew from the beginning of the 777 program how successful it would be. It's really turned into the darling of the long haul industry.
Oh, correct. Yes.
I mean,
yes.
It's cemented itself. I thought it would wane because the life of a 777-200 seems quite short in comparison to the 747, which, those planes go on and on and on and on and on. But 777-200s have been going to the desert to be parted out for several years now. Mm-hmm. But the line has just become the mainstay of long-haul travel as people have moved, I think we talked about this in one of the earliest episodes, to 2 engines for long-haul. And so they, like you say, the 777X coming out in a few years. I'm delighted because it's one of my favorite airplanes. I think it's a
Oh yeah, it's a
beautiful
beautiful airplane. I agree. Yeah.
technological achievement. So I'm happy
Uh,
that they're doing this.
Talking about technology, it's interesting as a tidbit. One of the ways that the evolutionary, so not the 777X, but the current model will evolve in the next 5 years. They will one of the ways it will be by reducing weight, and interestingly, and that shows also how technology evolves. The part of the systems, they were so basically the old wiring and the old technologies that are hidden from you as a passenger
Yeah.
was calculated to be much heavier in the past and also take much room. Which now with the miniaturization of all these technologies, they say that basically by not changing a lot in the plane, but just basically taking up so all this room that is now will sit empty, they can actually remove some part of the weight of the plane. That's pretty interesting. That especially in the crown, apparently.
Yeah, it's
That's-
and it every ounce that can be removed is a saving for not just for Boeing but for the airline as well. But for Boeing, it's a marketing piece, and for the airlines, it's a cost saving piece.
Exactly. The 777X, so the largest order is from Emirates again. they say they will buy 35 of the 8X version and 115 of the 9X version when it comes out. Interestingly, though, Lufthansa is buying quite a few as well, which means, and I'm sorry, Alex, because I'm the bearer of bad news, which means they will probably not buy any more 747-8 because they're going to put everything on the 777.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
disappointing, but we'll be preparing ourselves emotionally for this moment for quite a long time.
A piece of news for you, Alex, because there was just been released a new customer satisfaction survey in the U.S. And which airline is topping it again?
Good old Virgin America for the third year in a row.
Makes you happy, right?
It does. I was actually at Virgin America's home base yesterday filming my other show. And
Attaché.
and we went to Terminal 2 in San Francisco Airport, which is where Virgin America is based. And it was interesting for me to see how much the product has evolved from the check-in experience. They're big on the mood lighting, everything, but there was like thumping techno music, and it was like, and then on the other side of Terminal 2 is American Airlines, where they were just quietly punching you in the face as you checked in. But it was like, anyhow, I'm joking, of course, no disrespect to American Airlines. But
yeah, go ahead.
There was just such a different contrasting experience that even I was taken aback. Like, wow, this has come a long way, and people they obviously are happy with the entire experience if they've had this accolade for the last 3 years running.
Yeah, they have 12 airlines being ranked. The one that is closing the ranks is Envoy American Eagle. Sorry for them. United is probably the worst of the big four. It ranks at 9. That includes Continental, now that they've obviously joined forces. And just to very quickly, it's a report that goes and asks customers about the on-time arrivals. What kind of complaints do you have? Most of the complaints were from obviously delays, luggage, booking, ticketing, boarding even.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Denied boardings as well, apparently it appears in baggage handling. And you can have, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can have the rankings depending on what matters to you the most. But it's a great thing that Virgin America stays on top. We said earlier as well that they're doing better financially, so it's good news, especially for you because it's your baby of sorts, right?
Yeah, it is, and I'm honestly I'm happy people are liking it, and I'm not surprised at these rankings. I'm actually Delta really seemed to have upped their game. I haven't flown Delta in years. I will be flying them next month. JetBlue are a wonderful, wonderful airline, and I'm glad they continue to do well and have got through their kind of growing pains. So it's great. I think it kind of reinforces what we've been saying since the beginning of the show. You can't win these battles by complaining in a courtroom. You just have to continually improve your experience.
Yep, correct. Talking about experience and back to Europe, we had said, and I don't remember the name of the episode now, but we discussed about what happens in terms of compensation. Oh yeah, it's when we were talking about AirHelp, that app that helps you. Yeah. And maybe we'll do one day a segment about what exactly happens in terms of compensation, because it's a very complex matter. But Talking about this, in Europe, there's a regulation by the European Union that forces airline to give you some compensation depending on what kind of incident happened and the time of the delay, etc. And apparently, there are the three major airlines, which are Aer Lingus, Jet2, and Wizz Air, have not made the appropriate changes that regulators have asked them to do, and now they're being fined. So it's basically consumer. I'm not going to say that consumer rights are taken more seriously in Europe than they are in the U.S. What they are, probably they're taken more by the state, thus the court, than the U.S. And the court is starting to hit hard. It's not the first story that I've read in a recent month when a court says, "Hey guys, you're supposed to either compensate to do something with your customers, you haven't, so here's a fine." And the fine is pretty big. I think I don't remember the number, but it's. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that Wizz Air were involved in this. I'd never flown them, but I've always heard good things about them. So to hear that they were a repeat offender of this and had been punished quite substantially, as you say, was surprising to me. Jet2, on the other hand, have had issue after issue after issue, some near catastrophic around safety. I was not surprised to see them in this list, but Wizz Air I was, because they're supposed to be this new breed of low-cost carrier, and I think they might have been a little caught up in the low-cost bit of that.
Yeah, probably what they've been accused of here is, for those who have ever traveled in Europe, you're supposed to be told as a passenger about your rights. So you're supposed to be told that if the plane is late, you can go and ask for either a refund or some form of compensation. Now, for instance, I've flown Swiss last month. And last week, sorry, when you go on the the gate or the screens, one of the screens actually displays that and tells you, oh, if your flight is late, you have a right to compensation. So, and I think it was a failure to explain that to passengers that was being here pointed at.
Yeah,
so it's,
and I think that for someone like Wizz Air, you can maybe chalk it up to growing pains. And because they've grown extremely quickly, they have received accolades for their service and their product. And it is, from what I can see, a good product. You will then look at this in a year and go, have you improved? If not, okay, then this is a systematic failure and not a victim of your own success.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. We'll continue to cover this because we try not to cover all the news that just bash airlines. But as soon as the courts starts to get involved, it's interesting because it maybe shows a trend of actually, the regulator stepping in to actually manage the market. I mean, we'll see. Talking about safety, I mean, it's not entirely safety, but there's an Alaska airline flight that had a small surprise in its cargo hold, right?
So this flight from Seattle to LA, which is about a 2.5-hour flight, they had to return to Seattle because the captain heard a banging noise, a repeated banging noise coming from underneath the aircraft, from what they thought was inside the cargo hold. Now that must have been disconcerting because you don't want to hear a banging noise at any point during a flight. So they land. They were only in the air for 14 minutes, and I'm sure they got priority landing because, again, you do not want to be hearing a banging noise. After they landed, a cargo handler emerged from the cargo hold and had apparently fallen asleep. And this is not the first time this has happened. Unbelievably.
What?
This happens with alarming regularity. So they'd fallen asleep in the cargo hold. The plane had taken off. Now, fortunately for him, he was in the front cargo hold, which is pressurized and temperature controlled. So he was never. Yeah,
that's where they put the pets, for instance, right?
Yeah, that's where they put pets. So he was never in any danger from that. I mean, obviously he wasn't strapped in or secured, but I wouldn't want to be him right now because I'm sure that he got an earful at the very least when he got home. So.
Jeez, pretty cool story. Jesus
it is funny. Christ. And all's well that ends well, but I'm sure that he won't be doing that again.
Yeah, no, I'm sure not. Still remaining at airports in the U.S., a very small tidbit, but I found it fascinating. There was the TSA, so the Transportation Security Administration, released its fiscal report for 2014. And in it, you can read that it has, when you go to an airport, I'm sure you've done that, especially as an international traveler, when you have loose change, small pennies that you don't want because you might never return in the country because they're in a foreign currency, you might not need it. You have bowls, you can just drop, some coins in just before either usually before security.
Right.
And that report showed that TSA has earned through that an amount $674,000 last year.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's crazy. Obviously, the airports that I've seen the most are, like I just said, international airports. Of JFK is number one. Interestingly, for instance, Atlanta, which is a very big airport, is not very high because most passengers are national passengers that travel from and to the US, so they don't. But I mean, I've never thought about it because I do that all the time, especially with tiny coins that are worth basically nothing, and they cannot exchange in any currency exchange booth. So you just drop them. But $670,000, that's staggering. And the TSA can do whatever they want with the money. It's part of the budget now. So
that's ridiculous. I mean, if they're not exactly a popular organization, I think they could have used that as a little PR thing, saying we're going to give it all to local charities. But no, they're probably going to. Yeah, they won't.
Actually, the article, it was on Gizmodo that I read that. It said, whether that means more money funneled through facial recognition programs or more venti lattes for TSA employees is anyone's guess.
Wow. And actually, I tell you, having gone through TSA procedures for an hour-long flight twice in the space of 24 hours, I absolutely see why services like Surf Air are becoming extremely popular. Because when you're doing a 12-hour flight, you'll endure it, right? You'll endure the line and the sort of invasion of your personal space. But for a 45-minute flight to go through a 45-minute security process, that's starting to take the piss, as it were. So I can absolutely see why these services like Surf Air are becoming so popular, where you sidestep all of that.
We probably it would be fun to have an episode where we talk about a TSA, not to bash it because obviously again easy target.
They're doing something that needs to be done.
But to discuss this whole concept of security and maybe compare with our experience, it would be nice to find a guest about international experiences because they're very different. You have a very different approaches to security depending on which country, sometimes even which airport you are in the world. So it's an interesting topic. We'll try to cover it. Moving on to the innovation part of the news, and since we just talked about money through the TSA, this time money for Google, because we've been talking, Alex and I, a lot about Google, especially Google Flights, because it's a tool that we both find fascinating and extremely useful, and ITA as well. But the European Union this morning, today we are on Wednesday, this morning just basically formally accused Google of antitrust practices. Right?
Yeah,
that's pretty.
And it's not just in travel. It's a very,
of course not. It's very wide. It's search, it's mobile, so through Android. It's a wide net to investigate, because it's the start of the investigation now, to investigate whether or not they are basically have a weight in the market that is way too high. Interestingly, though, it comes to an article I had read, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, with the CEO of TripAdvisor, because, of course, for us here, you and me, we're talking about travel, especially air travel. The CEO of TripAdvisor had said that he was disappointed that in the US there was no such case being brought forward, and he was hopeful, that within the EU it would happen, and basically that's exactly what just happened. The part that I find interesting, and this is why I started to talk about it on Innovation News, is because Google, that's just barely 2-3 hours ago, just released its official answer to the start of the inquiry through a blog post that we will link on the show notes. It's called The Search for Harm. And interestingly, the first part of the answer is actually talking about travel. It's interesting how they start about saying, okay, so the reason why they think they're not displaying any anti-competitive behavior is they're using the example of them buying ITA and the Google Flights examples. I found it pretty interesting. They have a very nice chart here which shows what are the situation in Germany in terms of OTAs. And you can see that, for instance, of course, they show that to say that, oh, look, we're not the only ones in the market. There are many other players. And they show that in Germany, for instance, I'm sure they use in Germany because they know Germany is very tough on Google. Booking.com is first. I think Holiday Check is a German one is second, and TripAdvisor, etc. So they basically try to tell the public, look, we bought an OTA, we integrated it, but still the market is very free. It's interesting that they started with that one.
I think they might have also done that because they are legally obligated to not suppress, but their results can't come higher than their competitors because of the ITA acquisition. That was some of the conditions that were imposed to get that through the door. So they might do it because they have to do it. They might so they're using that as an example, but it's an interesting one, and the U.S. has already investigated this, and they said back in 2013 that they didn't violate antitrust laws, despite a report saying that perhaps they were getting dangerously close to it. And there's this thing that came out of the EU wasn't an official charge or investigation. It was, and they chose this word very carefully, an accusation. So it's an official accusation that they are abusing their dominance, as it were, of web search to promote their own interests. And it's a difficult challenge someone's going to have to unwrap this. And you're basically saying to Google, you cannot be successful because of your own success.
Exactly. And
or you cannot be successful because no one else in your field is successful.
It reminds me of when the EU was attacking Microsoft. They first started in '98. I mean, there were cases before, but the '98 case dragged on. It was the whole thing about browsers, etc. So there was '98 dragged until 2003, which they paid a first fine in 2004. Then there was another in 2008, another in 2009. That was the unbundling of the browsers, etc., etc. They just got fined, I think, 2 years ago for failing to actually adhere to one of the previous settlements. But it shows at the time between, we are accusing you of something, the investigation, and then a decision, maybe by the time of the decision is made, the market has shifted already.
Yeah.
Microsoft was a big case. By the time Microsoft had been basically asked to pay a fine, the market had shifted. Google had been much more powerful. Internet Explorer was losing market share. So we'll see. Though, it's not peanuts, because according to the rules in the EU, the fine that Google could see is up to 6 billion euros. So that's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
I just did for fun sakes. Just before the show, I went on Google and I just entered in the search box flights. I wanted to see which flights would come first. So you'll see. I was logged in the UK, so I was basically having results valid in the UK. There were two ads first for obviously Flight Centre and Opodo. There were Skyscanner, Expedia, etc., and Google Flights was 7th. So yes, they're not first, though. And this is where actually I don't know, because I don't know if it was because I was logged in. When I did that, there was a box under the ads, so it kind of the first spot of search where I could actually input directly, the 3-letter code. So
that's interesting.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I use Google Flights and I was logged in. It's not a scientific. No one takes that scientifically, but it's interesting, and I can understand why other OTAs are being a bit, fearful, at least. So we'll see.
I think they have good cause to make sure that this is being watched.
But though also, let's be honest, Europe has a history of being more having hitchy fingers about aggressive about that. I mean, they're looking into Amazon tax practices, looking into Facebook privacy,
Apple,
etc. Apple so we'll see where that leads to, but it's interesting. Anyway, going on, you had in episode of Middleweight, you had found a fantastic piece of news with this guy who was flying his plane and basically drawing a penis on the sky, which you could see with flight radar. And this time, actually, somebody had an idea to do something more romantic. We're talking about love, but more romantic. So Air Malta took off and drew 2 hearts. Have you seen the picture?
It's a lovely picture, and they're perfectly executed hearts. Yes.
It's pretty amazing, actually. I mean, I was like, because I caught the news when Air Malta was doing the first heart. The heart wasn't finished, and I had no knowledge of what it was, because actually Air Malta it was a special flight for lovers. I mean, some romantic flights, and they offered it as a special package, and people could just fly and then be part of that experience. Though I'm not sure, from the sky you don't really know what you're doing. You're just going around, and that does 2 hearts. But it's pretty fun. So everybody talked about it. I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago.
Yeah, it went all over the internet. It was a lovely idea, and again, like, I would encourage you guys to go and look at this picture. It's perfect.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely perfect. Kudos to the pilot, because and it's true that they're lucky, because Malta, for those who don't know, is a tiny island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, so they can do it because around them there's like water.
Yeah,
you couldn't probably not do that from Heathrow or JFK, right?
No, it would. No, I don't think you'd get away with that. But this is lovely, a nice idea.
I don't know if Hearts could solve the whole battle we're having here in the UK between Heathrow and Gatwick, which airport should have their third or second runway, et cetera. But there was an interesting article that I just stumbled upon a few days ago by Brett Snider. He writes a blog called crankyflyer.com. And he interviewed the general manager of customer affairs for the UK's air traffic control service. So the guys who are in charge of our airspace here in the UK. And they've introduced at Heathrow a new system that they've been testing since January, which allows basically planes to be closer to each other. Do you want to explain how it works, or should I?
Yeah, I read this article, and one of my good friends, as you all know, is an air traffic controller, and I still found myself saying, so wait, what? But they have
basically,
go ahead.
So basically, there's heavy aircrafts must be separated by 4 nautical miles. I mean, there's many reasons for that. There's wind shear, etc. So they have to have this kind of regulatory separation when they land one after each other. You've seen that in all airports around the world. Heathrow being basically completely at capacity, at 98, 99% capacity. They are trying to find ways to actually, how can we play with that number? So when there's no wind, that's the article saying. So this maybe we should have an expert telling us back this up. Well, there's no wind. It's that plays out. 40 planes can land every hour. Where there's some winds, though, you still have to maintain security, and sometimes it means that instead of doing 90 seconds and I live under one of the pathway of Heathrow. Actually, planes are flying over my head now. There's a plane every 90 seconds. But where there are winds, to still maintain that same safe distance, that can translate to, instead of 90 seconds, according to the article, 107 seconds, which means obviously less planes land every hour, which means there are more delays, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently, Heathrow has worked with a system that is made, I don't remember the name of the company, was it Honeywell? Lockheed Martin, that allows to, in real time, analyze the winds and wind shear, not only at Heathrow Airport, but all throughout the descent of the plane. So they can actually manage the space between planes to maintain as close to each plane as possible while maintaining safety regulation, which apparently translates to being closer to these 40 planes per hour, instead of having to play with safety and putting planes a bit further from each other. I find it interesting. I find it interesting that they're going through some length. Obviously, Heathrow, as I just said, has capacity issues, so they had to maybe be creative to find ways to land, aircrafts on time. But I think maybe one day we should have someone to talk about this. So maybe I could even reach out to that. I think Andy Chand is the general manager for customer affairs for these UK airspace. I could even reach out to him and ask him how it works.
It would be really good, because there's also the additional microwave approach that I think BA uses almost exclusively at Heathrow, which allows for more precision approaches and slightly different spacing. So it would be really good to kind of unbox this a little bit more, because it's a fascinating subject.
Yes, it is. I don't know if you've ever circled around Heathrow or any other airport on circling pattern because you were waiting for
Heathrow is so bad.
Heathrow is
especially
one of the
first thing in the morning.
But it happens a lot. And so maybe, I don't know how you entertain yourself in planes, but just a small piece of news here. I don't know if you know Angry Birds. I'm sure you know it.
Yeah.
So Angry Birds, it's just Rovio, the company who's behind Angry Birds, just made a licensing deal with one of the major players in IFE Entertainment, Global Eagle Entertainment, and you'll have Angry Birds on your IFE.
That's quite cool.
It is pretty cool.
Because usually, like a lot of the games are sort of copies of popular games, and it's sort of
very bad,
really bad. But this will make a lot of people very happy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Exactly. I'm really. I don't know how it will play out, but I mean, it was a fun piece of news. Let's be honest, though. Angry Birds, after having these, they say Rovio said it has been the most ever downloaded game in history. They say they've had 2.8 billion downloads across all the different games of Angry Birds, which is pretty impressive. But they've been hitting some rocks in the past 6 months. I mean, they had to lay off some people because I think they were overextending the franchise. At some point, you could find, Angry Birds, teddy bears, and Angry Birds, everything. Basically, they even thought about doing a Hollywood movie, or so maybe they overextended a bit. But it's good news for them. This Finnish company, which is pretty cool. I met the founder. He's a really, really cool guy. From birds to pets, we had mentioned the guy from stuck in Alaska, in the Alaska airline. You remember you had said, I think you had found a piece of news a few episodes ago, I think it was 005, when you said that this Delta had lost some show dogs.
That's right, yeah. There was, even despite having an app that, they discovered via the app that the dogs were not on the same plane as the owners.
So now, you already had some kind of possibility to track your pets if you have any pets in the hold. There was not a full tracking. It was basically the airline giving you updates.
Yes.
But now Delta is stepping up its game, maybe because they've been accused of having too many injuries. I had said that Delta were the worst for death and injuries to pets in 2010 to 2013. United was last year. So they stepped up their game, and now they're offering you, if you pay $50, you'll have your pet tracked
and that's
by
on top,
GPS.
That's on top of the already substantial fee it costs to transport a pet on an airline.
So $50, and maybe I don't know. It's you'll have more peace of mind. But $50. But you know what? There's obviously a catch here. Is that this use cellular service, and obviously when you are in the sky, you don't have cellular service. I don't know how that would work. But.
So I guess really all it's doing is giving you the peace of mind that the animal is on the same plane as you and has been, treated appropriately from the moment they get onto the plane, and then you get nothing, so you don't get any peace of mind while you're flying. And then once they get off, you'll be able to track their progress through the airport until they're finally
facilities.
Until they're finally reunited.
Apparently, the same service, that $50 will also give you. You'll have the air temperature surrounding the cage, the angle of the cage, the location, obviously. So stuff that kind of peace of mind. And if the sensor detects on the cage itself, the sensor goes in a warning situation. You'll have the Delta personnel apparently will be warned, and something will I don't know, but I mean, this is how they sell it.
That's good.
Obviously, just after we recorded last week our episode about Amsterdam Airport, honestly, the day after, or maybe even hours after we had finished the recording and we put it live, KLM announced that they were doing a partnership with Amsterdam Airport, and they're offering now wayfinding. So basically on your app, you'll be able to, and I just wanted to mention it because obviously it happened, we talked for 10 minutes about KLM and about Amsterdam Airport, and we mentioned it. So basically now the app is going to be like in Frankfurt Airport. You'll have a way to know your way around the airport, apparently. I'll try to test that out. I should be in Amsterdam Airport in 2 months. I will try to download it.
Yeah, you have to report back and see how it works.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. I always love how, these airlines, I mean, it's not only airlines, everyone says we're the first in the industry. So first of all, we know that Frankfurt Airport does that. We know that also even Miami Airport has iBeacons, so they always tout that they were the first to do that. Anyway, it's interesting that they do it. What else did we? Yes. I don't know if you've seen you've never been to Narita Airport. Right?
I have not.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it. We'll do an episode about it. But you've been telling me, Paul, let's do Narita. And I said, you know what? I want to take my time because this is such a fascinating history behind the airport. I don't want to. I want to take my time searching for it. But so in Narita, a new terminal just opened. It's D3. It's a low-cost terminal. It's pretty big. A friend of mine just been there yesterday and told me that it's It's very big terminal for that will just cater to low cost. So that includes all these low cost Asian airlines that travel, to Thailand and so on. But the fun thing is, because maybe you know that Tokyo will host the Olympics in 2020, they've come for a very imaginative solution to signage. So usually signage costs a lot to install, and also it's sometimes not very easy to understand. Usually the toilets are easy to understand, male, female, and landing. And so they installed basically a running track in the entire airport.
That's a really good idea. I love stuff like that. Because these are airports that have quite a lot of transit passengers. And if you've got 4 or 5 hours and you've come on a trans-Pacific flight and you do like running, I love running, to be able to throw on your gym shorts and sneakers while you wait for your flight is, gosh, what a wonderful thing.
And at the same time, so the entire track is color-coded. So it leads you somewhere. So it leads you throughout the entire airport. So if you want to go, I think it's... red is arrivals and blue is departures, so you can actually even find your way around just by following those lanes. I think it's a pretty fun way. It plays into sports, plays into the Olympics, plays into having something a bit different. So I loved it. I'll put the link. You guys should check the picture. I don't think since we do not live in Asia, chances that we will go to this terminal are very low, but it's if you guys do have a chance, if anyone listening does have a chance, just send us a picture from there or something, because it must be really cool, actually.
And if anyone from Narita Airport is listening and wants to fly us out there to test in person, I'm sure that we could find a block in our schedule to accommodate that.
Oh, sure, of course. So the app of the week, since we started talking about aircrafts and seats, we decided again to go for one that we've mentioned several times before, Seat Guru. Do you use Seat Guru?
I do, and I almost religiously use it before every flight. I feel like I know the seat configurations on the airlines I frequent, but I actually got caught out by this recently. I might have mentioned this on a previous call, but I always sit at the window if I can. I just love to look out the window, see the world go by. I know a lot of people think I'm crazy because you're furthest away from the aisle, but to me, it's worth it. The views are totally worth it. I booked a flight recently on Ryanair, and they were fine. We won't get into that. But I paid extra to pick my seat. I picked the window seat, and I sat down and thought, great, here's my window seat, which I love. And there was no window. There was just a wall, because it's an anomaly in this particular type of aircraft, which is a 737-800, in the way that they have the seats lined up. I just had a wall instead of a window. So I was furious. Now, SeatGuru.com and their app would have told me that, Alex, this particular seat does not have a window. But I didn't. I neglected to check it, and I shan't be doing that again. But what SeatGuru is a wonderful website that has the seat maps for every type of configuration for most airlines and their airplanes, and kind of rates each seat positively or negatively based on what features it has, like, is there a personal screen, is there a USB port or a plug or anything like that, its proximity to the galley or to the toilets or anything else, other little things that you perhaps might not have considered. You could book and probably pay extra for an emergency exit row. But in many airplanes, especially in older 747-400s, when you're by the emergency exit, where the door is, there's a substantial protrusion into where your leg space would be if you're in the window seat. And that's where the emergency slide is kept. So you actually don't get much more leg room at all on some of those seats. And again, Seat Guru would tell you about this. It's a great service.
Yeah, I do that also religiously before almost any flight, and a few times I haven't done so, whereas I had stories like you. It's you can also check, so if you're not sure, because sometimes you're not sure about the type of aircraft you're going to have, but they're pretty good at actually, you just put the date and the flight number you'll have, and it'll tell you, okay, this is the aircraft you'll have.
Pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. It works, honestly, 90% of the time. I had a few occasions, but usually it's not because of Seat Guru. It's because, the airline just decides to
switch the aircraft
last minute. Yeah. So it's not. But it obviously it's great. It's color coded, so you'll see some seats are red, means, they can, they have a lot of downsides. Some are yellow, which has some downsides. Some are green, or great seats.
Yeah.
For all three classes. You have sometimes pictures of the seats as well. You can pretty much any airline, I mean, all the major airlines plus a whole lot of others. Not every single airline. I have in few occasions emerging countries couldn't find it. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that you guys should do. I mean, we're telling you a secret because now we've got to fight for our seats.
Yeah. Hey, I will give you guys a very specific seating tip right now. If you're flying Virgin Atlantic in economy on a 747-400, which is becoming less and less possible these days, but I'm sure many of you will, book Virgin Atlantic have the upper deck split into half economy, half upper. If you can, snag a seat on the upper deck for two reasons. One, you have a dedicated flight attendant just for that small block of economy passengers. So it's actually three reasons. Two, the upper deck is quiet. It's dark on overnight flights. There's very little noise. And third, when you come down those stairs, you're dumped out way ahead of the premium economy and economy passengers. So you are among the first people to get off the airplane when you land. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, it's a good thing. The only thing I will say, and there is an emergency exit row on the upper deck. Avoid it because the seats are super, super narrow and you can't raise the armrests. Now, if anyone from Virgin is listening and you've changed that, tell me, but I actually avoid them. I get the seat up against the rear of the upper deck. So, pro tip.
Actually, I told you in several episodes that I've never flown Virgin Atlantic, and it might just happen next month.
Nice.
Because I'm flying to New York, and I'm flying out with Delta. And since Delta and Virgin now have code sharing, I think my flight back is a Virgin. So I will ask you about that seating arrangement when I have my final call that plane, because I really want to choose a nice seat.
Nice.
And I hope a 747. I know it's an old plane, but we both love 747s. So now that you've basically given me a great follow-up for the next part, the topic of the week, we're going to talk about seats. This week is the Aircraft Interiors Expo in Hamburg. It's basically a trade show where they talk about aircraft seats. And most of the time when we hear about aircraft seats, we hear about, that's what we both said earlier in the episode, about these premium fantastic seats, the residents from Etihad, and these, you have TV screens are larger than a movie theater, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's nice, but that's maybe 5% of the population that can access, of the flying population that gets into these seats in terms of even. So we want to talk a little bit about what happens in the back, which is where most people, including us, most of the time travel, right? It's not, we would wish to be in first class all the time.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So you had started by telling that Emirates was introducing that new route to Copenhagen. So that shows that there's an interest in having a lot of economy seats. But to be a bit fair, when you talk about that, this is where we start bashing airlines, because when we talk about that, it's true that the experience economy is really, really good. I don't know. Do you think, the question is pretty simple. Do you think that overall the experience in economy has worsened since you started flying?
Yes. Absolutely. And I think you can look at it from when commercial flying really became available to the masses. It's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse as airlines try and optimize cost versus revenue. I think there have been incremental improvements in cabin technology, in personal and in-flight entertainment, which have removed the sting a little bit. But overall, I think in terms of physical comfort, take away the food and all of that stuff, I think it's gotten worse and worse and worse.
Actually, we also mentioned the customer satisfaction in the U.S. I mean, these kind of surveys exist all around the world. In the U.S., one of the major complaints is obviously flight problems, and flight problems usually means that we're very unhappy about our seating experience. And it's true that if you look at what most people look at is the pitch, so how much legroom you'll have in your seat compared to the seat in front of you. And it's true that this has been going in the wrong direction. I mean, I'm tall. I'm 6'4", 195 centimeters. It's true that now you have airlines like Spirit Airlines in the US have 28 inches. United has 30, is a bit better, but it's really getting tiny. And I will quote you something, because the the DOT and the FAA are currently doing, basically, they are working with customers to actually understand this market, and if they have to step into it and make some regulation. And there's the consumer voice for in that panel, because right now there's just discussion, has said this: is in a world where animals have more rights to space and food than humans, it is time that the DOT and FAA take a stand for human treatment of passengers.
Wow. And I mean, that's pretty hyperbolic, but
yeah, of course.
In a way, they have a point, and I wonder if we're going to get to a point quite soon where there is a minimum legal amount of seat pitch that you cannot offer less of.
Actually, it's interesting because in that same article, there was, and I didn't know that, maybe you knew, that the FAA regulates that the entire aircraft must be able to evacuate in less than 90 seconds
Yes.
in case of an incident. But they do this with seats that are with a 30-inch pitch. So if you're going lower than that, the FAA has never actually done tests. And of course, the tests are like, we put like 200 people on a plane, but they know it's for a test. They know it's going to happen. They know, like there's a lot of course, but that's pretty normal. But even the FAA itself is not testing for legroom that is less than 30. So this is why maybe you're right. At some point, there might be a regulation in place that says, hey guys, you have to have, I don't know. Go ahead.
No, you're right. And I think further to your point, a lot of these regulations are built on number of passengers per door and number of passengers per flight attendant. There are minimums for those. But you're right. If you keep compressing the distance between seats, eventually you're going to create a bottleneck, a tripping hazard, a density issue where there's going to be a tragedy because people cannot get off the plane in time, especially if there's fire or smoke or anything like that. So I would be surprised, and I'm oversimplifying this by saying they'll say 30 inches is the minimum. It can't work like that because planes are different. Like I said, number of doors and flight attendants is different. So, but I would not be surprised if they come up with something that says, and not from a comfort perspective or a human right perspective or whatever they said, but purely from a safety and evacuation perspective.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, there are a lot of people say that, you could have thrombosis or a blood clot if you are in your, but let's be honest here. It happens, but it's extremely, extremely, extremely rare. Although we've never known, of course, if two more long-haul flights start offering like 27-inch legroom, what's going to happen? I'm not sure, but it's still limited. I would say for me, the most problematic part of this, besides comfort, is that it creates anger within. I mean, there's always like a lot of anger about, the overhead bins are completely full. Maybe, by the boarding experience is not well done. And it's maybe not the fault of the airline. It's fault of people wanting to go as fast as they can in the flight because they want to actually put stuff in the overhead bin.
Yeah.
But then happens that all this, and remember, we had many, many stories last year we both covered on layovers about the needed defender. So basically, people starting to have fights in the cabin because the guy or the lady in front of them would recline the seat, and they would start actual flight. There have been 3 planes diverted in, I think it was less than 2 weeks. I think it was August and September last year, just because people started fighting. So I think the most problematic here is the anger that it creates, and obviously then the safety, because of course, not only diverting a plane, but the stress level for flight attendants, the stress level for passengers. I mean, first of all, have you ever seen a need defender?
Not in person, no.
No. What do you think about it?
It's an abomination. They should be banned. And if you're,
I knew that. That's why I asked.
If you're sociopathic enough to use one on an airplane, then I worry about you. It's such a heinous product. And it's dangerous as well. I think when you're interfering with the mechanics of an airplane, even if it's something as simple as the seat recline, that's fine. That's just not cool at all.
No, it's not okay.
And it's funny because the reclining is an issue, and airlines and seat manufacturers have tried a lot of different ways to do it. Like with EasyJet, they just don't recline because
there's a small recline already built in.
So they claim, which is fine. And their seats are not uncomfortable, and they know that The longest you're going to be in one, pending any delays, is 3 to 4 hours. That's the limit of their radius. They have some outlier routes, but for the vast majority, that's fine. And then there was these clamshell seats that were the seat back, and I'm showing Paul on the video, but I don't know why. But for those of you at home,
it's basically the seat internalizes the reclines instead of having the back of your seat going backwards. You have your cushion under you going slightly forwards, and that creates the angle, but you're not disturbing anyone behind, and obviously, of course, the person in front of you either. That's ANA was one of the first to introduce you.
Cathay had it for a while, and anyone from Cathay or who has been on Cathay recently, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they abandoned it, because if you're sitting down right now listening to this, do something. Scoot your butt forward in your seat, but don't move your back, and tell me how comfortable that is. Not very, right? So in theory, you're like, oh, wow, it just extends you kind of are cradled a little bit. But in practice, I think it doesn't work very well from what I understand. That mechanism of the seat going back and forward broke quite often because they were, if you think about the amount of times per day that was done. So we're still a long way away from solving this problem unless we just say there is a minimum set of comfort requirements that we're all going to adhere to. And that's just never going to happen.
Yeah. We're going to go, before I go through examples of airlines, because of that expo, there have been some seats that have been revealed. And again, we're not going to talk about the premium seats because that's almost too easy. We'll have one day a segment about talking about these premium seats because it's always fancy to look at them and think, a dream, even flying with them all the time. But let's look at the hard times of the economy here. There was another article that I read in the New York Times. It was pretty scathing because it was a new trend. I've never yet seen that, where people, that was probably in the US, people were saying that since they were so angry about the whole experience, they started just grabbing whichever seat, in a plane. So even if you were assigned, I don't know, a 17D or something, you thought, oh, I want that seat, and you just start sitting there. And then, of course, the flight attendants become sort of negotiating with you that, hey, it's not your seat. And people, I don't know. Have you ever seen that in a flight yourself?
I haven't seen it in the U.S. I've seen it in other parts of the world. Yeah, and you're just a jerk if you do that.
But that creates more anger and anxiety, both for flight attendants, for other passengers.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we just said we both use Seat Guru, and I'm always very early to choose my seat. Either I can do that when I'm booked, and some airlines tell you that you can only do that 24 hours, 23, depending on the airline before booking. I actually set an alarm, and actually exactly 24 hours, I go on the website and I choose my seat, which I've previously chosen on Seat Guru, because I'm maybe I'm tall, so I want to have something that have some leg room or some type of comfort. But if I can imagine myself, if I would enter the plane and some other person would be sitting on my seat and just refusing to let go, that creates anxiety. So I'm a polite person, so I'm not going to start a fight, but it creates the whole and then of course you put your anger not only on the person but the airline itself. You say, this airline sucks because anyway. Going to a little bit about the configuration, because the other part of the seat, you have the seat, you have the width. So how much the pitch, and now you have the width. How much room do you have? You just mentioned that in the the upper deck of Virgin Atlantic
and many other 747s. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to go through a few aircrafts, because they've all made plans, because aircraft are just following the markets, and airlines are asking to cram more seats in planes. So the 747 is actually going for 9 abreast. So only ANA and JAL have 8 abreast. The 787 and other airlines now is 9 abreast. There are rumors that they won't even go to 10. I don't know how they're going to do that. But would that mean that with 9 abreast, so 9 seats, 9 abreast, for those who don't know, it means that 9 seats in a single row. With 9 seats in a single row, you have less room on a 787 than 10 seats on a 777. So this is not really really nice. Even less room than on a 737, but of course, because the design of the plane is much older. On the 737 MAX, so that's new version of the 737 that will enter into service, you'll have Ryanair is said that will include 200 seats compared to current the current version of the 737, only 160 seats. So also they're cramming more and more seats in a single plane. And to react to that, Airbus is releasing, they're releasing the A320neo, so the A320 with new engines. It was originally intended to have 180 seats, but they want to increase that to 195. They were not authorized yet by the European Aviation Safety Agency, but they want to go to 195, which means that in these situations you'll have a seat that will be so narrowed. I'm not even sure I can actually fit it.
Yikes!
It's not really. It's not. I'm not looking forward to that. Another way to cramp seats is the A380. So Airbus has released a new design on how to design the toilets and the galley at the back of an aircraft. So you can have smaller toilets. Also, one is angled differently. The galley is much smaller, and thus you gain rows of seats. And then they want to put that in the A320 Neo we just mentioned, but also it doesn't have a name. I'll call it the A320 195 because it doesn't have a name. This new configuration. So they also think it's not only about the seats. It's thinking about how we can remove space of everything else. So the galleys, the toilets. Remember that at some point Ryanair's CEO said, "Oh, people would have to pay for the toilets."
Yeah, it's
go ahead.
It's like it's getting to the point where it's purely about economics and not about passenger comfort. The passenger comfort is not factored into that at all, and it's getting ridiculous. I'm hoping that there's an opportunity for airlines to use this to differentiate themselves and saying, we're not going to do this. We're going to use seat pitch as an advantage, but what we now accept as the base standard seat pitch, I fear in 5 years will be premium, seating. Guess what? We have 27 inches of seat pitch. Woohoo! But you have to pay an extra $50 for it.
The 195 passenger version of the A320 Neo is exactly as 27. It's 27 legroom. That's nothing. I mean, I can't even imagine I would not fit in that.
And I don't, the vast majority of the flying public are not going to be. They're not going to look up the fact that there's only 27 inches of seat pitch before they fly and make their airline choice based on that piece of information. They're going to get on the airplane and think, okay, I've got a great deal. Sit down and go, what the hell is this? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Actually, the A350 will also come with a similar version. They will put that abreast. But maybe not to go to details because for some people, even the names of the plane do not mean anything. The prime example is the A380. So you mentioned the A380 that Emirates was going into a two-class version of the A380. Interesting enough, back in the day, Emirates had asked Airbus to look at a version. So currently, in economy, you have 10 abreast, so 10 seats in a single row. Emirates itself had asked in the past Airbus to look at a version which potentially would have 11 seats abreast. They abandoned the idea, but not Airbus. And Airbus is actually going to release a version of the A380 with 11 seats abreast. And there are pictures online, and it comes exactly to the point you were saying about the 747 emergency exit door in a Virgin Atlantic, is that if you are at the window, you basically almost cannot put even your feet on the ground because you are the curve of the plane. That's insane.
Wow. So would it be 353?
Yeah, apparently that's what they will do. 353. Yeah, but it's always. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I've flown in A380 twice in economy. It was a 10 abreast on Emirates. It was okay, I guess. I mean, I never liked the 5 seats version because, of course, if you're in the middle of the 5 on the middle row, that's the worst scenario possible for a middle seat, right?
Yeah.
But you remember maybe when you were a kid, I don't know if you remember that because I do. There were some MD-11 and also the Douglas, the DC-10. They had 252. Yeah. It was not like we went to later on. We had the 333 that became the one you see everywhere. But the 252 was, as a kid, I remember in the US when I was visiting with my parents. I remember these 252. That was kind of a very admitted possibility. So now, well, anyway, it's interesting factor. I also had written, I remember if you remember that, the Cebu Pacific, I think I already mentioned
as
introduced it, A330 with 430, I think 36 passengers, which compare with Emirates as 267, Singapore is 255 in the same aircraft.
Wow, they are pushing the envelope there.
Yeah, it's really, really insane. Anyway, so I don't think when you look at the design seats, and this is not why we're not talking about design itself, because design is very hard to explain in a podcast. There are some interesting designs that are coming up for economy seats. You mentioned one, stuff similar that EasyJet is doing. So very, very thin seats with new type of foam that doesn't take a lot of room, but is still comfortable. Yeah. I guess for low-cost airlines that do short to medium haul, that will be something we'll see more and more. But in long haul, I don't see discomfort going good in any time soon.
And again, there's like this tolerance point where you get on a plane knowing your flight's going to be 2.5 hours. You'll endure it. But for 12 hours, there's health issues. There are legitimate health issues and comfort issues that have got to be taken into consideration. But people will always, I think they'll endure a certain amount of discomfort and pain for the money.
Yeah, because it's paying. Yeah. You remember we said that Delta has introduced 5 classes now, so it's kind of an economy minus.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, this is exactly what happens, and it's I'm sure it's the same. We're not criticizing people for going for the lowest fare.
No,
it's
not
just
at
the
all.
way it is. And that's why airlines are probably playing. It's maybe a harsh word, but playing with that reality. The only, I would say that there are a few seats that are nice. I'll put some links on the show notes, that modern seats that seem to be more ergonomic, even though there's no recline, even though they're very narrow, they seem more ergonomic than others. I'm sure we're going to go into that direction. My point is there is some innovation for economy seats as well. There was as well, I don't remember if you remember, Air New Zealand had introduced the Sky Couch. So basically you would have 3 in a row of 3 economy seats. If you have the 3, you can transform that into a bed.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
There's like an extension that comes up, and I looked at the pricing for that, and it, for maybe 20% more, you get a business class seat. It seems a little. Now, if you're on one of those seats and you haven't paid it, you just paid for a single economy seat, and there happens to be an empty flight, and you do get it, then jackpot. But it doesn't. I'd love to talk to somebody who's flown on it.
One interesting innovation is one seat maker, I don't remember the name, is coming up with a seat that is like what you see in theaters, in movie theaters, where the cushion is actually raising when you're not seated.
Huh.
So that would, because that would solve we have to escape the plane very quickly, because I see. So
clever.
Maybe. Yeah, it's clever. I don't know if it's gonna ever happen in the flight, but that's a clever design. We'll see if it ever happens. And there are many patents we see and people love to talk about patents, but you never know where they're going with that. Yeah. But there was one that was really fun. That was Boeing. That you actually, I don't know if you've seen it, where you could actually have some kind of, I don't know, strap on that would let you sleep. So it'd be if you put, there's a basically, I don't know how you call that, something that grabs you to your seat, and if you fall asleep falling in front, it will actually grab you so you can sleep. Like, I don't know.
It's like being in a baby carrier.
Exactly. Anyway, guys, check Seat Guru all the time. There are also articles on Skift that will put that they tell you which are the best economy seats according to them. So if you have to make a choice, you can make a choice there. Obviously, the best are Etihad and Qatar according to Skift, but there are others that American Airlines apparently is pretty good according to their calculations and to the competition. So there are many things you can do. We'll put a lot of links for you to understand. And now moving on to the question of the week, something that really I'm expecting. I want Alex to tell me which are the craziest runways in the world.
So yeah, this actually came from a post on the Layovers Facebook page, and which it was slightly off topic, but inspired me to explore this, because I think there's so many great videos on YouTube of these crazy landings, but no one is 100% sure where they actually are. So I wanted to go through and find a few of the craziest, scariest, most kind of extraordinary runways in the world that commercial airliners fly into. There's some amazing desert outcrops that only a reinforced Cessna Caravan can land at, but these are all airports that regularly scheduled airlines go into. And the first one I wanted to talk about is in Nepal, and it's Lukla Airport, which is based on basically the side of a mountain. And we'll post links to videos of all of these airports. So the way you take off at this airport, way up in the Himalayas, is you taxi to the end of the runway, and the pilots will put on the brakes as hard as they can, throttle up as to full takeoff power, release the brakes. You go downhill, and then the runway ends, and there's nothing. There is a cliff, a drop off. So
Wow.
if you have an aborted takeoff, that's it. You're done. That's the end of the world. So they just hammer it, and you actually drop off at the end of it a little bit, and then whatever speed you need to make up falling to earth.
I think Courchevel in near Mont Blanc is built
very
a bit
similar.
the same. You also
very
have
similar, and just the same. Courchevel goes down a hill, and then you go off the end, and whatever lift you don't have from your takeoff run, you get from dropping.
The drop, yeah, exactly. You take flight during the drop. This is insane.
And there's a wonderful bar or coffee shop that overlooks the runway in Nepal that I've never been to, but it's on my bucket list to just sit there and watch these crazy guys jump off the edge of a cliff. So that is staggering. And if you have a problem, at the other end of this ravine is just mountains. So so it is a very dangerous airport. There have been some accidents going into it.
There's before you move on, there's it's not a commercial one, but I'll put a link as well. There's one in Lesotho, which is in Africa, which is exactly similar. So you have a small like airfield, and then it's only used for emergency for doctors to come into villages and stuff. But you have the same kind of feeling where there's an airfield and then nothing, and you have to drop, and then if you haven't, there's no like return point. That's
right.
Off. Anyway, go on.
Terrifying. So the next one is less dangerous in terms of piloting, but for pedestrians and cars, it can be very dangerous. This is Gibraltar, which is on the Iberian Peninsula. It's actually a British overseas territory. Disputed, as most British overseas territories are.
Yes.
The crazy thing about this is it's quite small geographic footprint, and it's a modern former RAF base that's now an airport. The runway goes across the only road that connects Gibraltar with Spain. So you're driving along the runway, which is cool in of itself. But when a plane needs to land, a railway crossing-like thing comes down, and the plane lands right in front of you, instead of a train, and it taxis off, and then they check to make sure that there's no one else coming. The barrier goes up, and you drive across the runway into Gibraltar. I've been there. You can walk across the runway. It's the only way to get from Spain into Gibraltar.
Wow.
It is really neat to do. It's so cool.
Wow.
It's in terms of uniqueness, I don't think there are many airports quite like it. So that's another one of my favorites. So Paro, which is in Bhutan, which is a very
in the Himalayas,
is a small it's a small country, apparently the happiest country on earth. They have a happiness index in their economy.
Yes, it's true.
Their airport is like, for those of you that are Star Wars fans, and I think pretty much everybody is, at the end of Episode 4, A New Hope, when Luke Skywalker is flying through the canyon on the Death Star to drop the killer blow, it's basically that. They have to weave through mountain valleys, fly directly at hillsides before doing a really tight final turn to land on a very, very short runway. There is a spectacular video on YouTube taken from the flight deck of one of these, of the local Bhutanese airline. And you're like, this has got to be an air show approach or something. There's no way. This is the published approach into this airport, and it's exhausting to watch on YouTube. I can't even imagine being a passenger at night in bad weather doing this.
Or even a pilot.
And apparently you have to go through a special certification process just to land at this airport, just like London City. Amazing. I don't know if I could do it myself, but pretty crazy. The next one is, and Paul and I were, right before we came on here, we're talking about how we actually pronounce this, is, I'll say St. Bart's.
No, but that's correct. It's just that the original name is Saint-Barthélemy, which is French,
Much
but
nicer.
Saint-Barth
Much
is
nicer.
Yeah.
So this is another small Caribbean island where real estate is at a premium. And the airport, the runway is very, very short. It's only 2,100 feet. And at one end is the water, and the other end is a hill. And the way that these and it's exclusively prop planes or very, 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 very small jets. But the only things that I've seen landing there are prop planes. And they basically hug the hillside on their glide slope as they come down and hopefully stop in time, because if they don't stop in time, everybody on the plane is going to get very, very wet. And it's again, wonderful videos on YouTube, because there's a road that runs along the top of the hillside, and you can park your car and lie on the hillside and watch these planes to kind of give you a haircut with their landing gear. And it's you have to be a very skilled pilot to be able to shoot these approaches, and sadly there have been a few accidents, but there is a video of a Piper Aztec running out of runway after touching down a little bit too short. No injuries, thankfully, but it shows you how precarious this airport is.
And
two more. Tegucigalpa in Honduras.
Yeah, yes, this one, the videos, I love that.
These are unbelievable videos. It's a similar setup to St. Bart's in that you have not a very, very long runway. It's only 6,000 feet, and compare that to nearly 10,000 at LAX. But there are 757, 767, 737s landing on this. And again, it hugs a hill. The approach hugs a hillside. So it doesn't look like the plane is actually going down. It's just following the terrain until you realize it's actually going down a hill. And it looks like they're going to scrape their tails on the ground as they shoot this extraordinary, as Jalopnik referred to it, a armrest, death-gripping, butt-clenching, nervous approach. And again, you can get up and stand on the hill and watch. You're at eye level with passengers who are landing this approach. And as Paul said earlier, there are some amazing videos of 737s landing halfway down the runway and jamming every inch of their brake pads into the ground to finally do this and get there safely.
Because let's before you move to the last one, because the last one is also the name of the show. But there are, unless you have another one, but there are a lot of videos online where people say on YouTube, you go crazy takeoffs or crazy landings. And most are not done actually in very dangerous airports. It's just a lot of wind.
Just bad landings.
Yeah. But it's not by itself, by definition, dangerous. You know, when you're in a plane, some places don't see that, but it's pretty normal. The plane is not exactly in line with the runway when it lands. That's okay. Yeah. There are some that are more. So, but these airports, as you mentioned, are truly something special. Most of them actually require a special license to just actually
shoot the approach.
Them.
And that's a very good point.
But one that of course is closed, and it was also the table of the show, is Hong Kong.
That was such a great airport.
That was also a great airport that needed also some trainings. I found since then a video of a landing of a Swiss Air from the inside. That was in the 60s. I'll put that in the links. It was pretty cool to see. Any other airport?
The last airport, which is also our airport of the week, is Princess Juliana International at as I say, Saint Martin, but is not apparently the correct pronunciation.
No, that's correct. Don't worry about it. It's the island. The part of that island is Dutch anyway. For those who don't know, it's look at where the Dominican Republic is, and you just go basically a bit east, and you'll find it.
And this airport is every airplane enthusiast top of their bucket list. Why?
I mean, first of all, it's a holiday destination.
Yeah, it's
right?
beautiful.
So
it's in paradise.
Yeah, it's paradise. I would love to go there just to be on a resort there, right? But the runway is at sea level, almost 4 meters. Come on, it's at sea level, and it's not very long. It's actually pretty short. You have 747s. You have very big planes. There's not props here.
Big airplanes coming from all over the world.
KLM, actually a lot of KLM, obviously, because it's Dutch. And they have to land. There's a small piece of beach just before the runway, and you can actually spot, you can be just under the plane when it lands. And when I say just under, look at the videos, you're like, basically, it's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, just for that, I would not even care about the quality of the resort. I just want to stay for a full day on that beach and watch plane land and take off.
Yeah, the Mojave Beach in St. Martin there's got to be more videos of that beach than any other beach in the world, because it is spectacular. And these planes are coming over tens of feet above you.
Yes, tens of feet. Yeah, it's insane. You would never be authorized to be in that position as a human being in any other airport in the world.
That's such a great way of putting it.
It's just, you see people like being, especially with the turbines of the engines, just some people even like being, falling, because it's actually dangerous. I don't know if you call that dangerous. You still have to be cautious. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to take a picture. You're having a 747 laying 10 feet above you. It's, just pay attention when it happens. But it's amazing. Actually, it's so crazy that the airport itself, so if you go on their website, SXM-airport.com, they actually will show you videos of landings that they've chosen and picked from plane spotters, and they're not even them. So they're very well aware that they have this position.
Yeah.
You can go on their Instagram account, or you can go on Facebook, and you'll see like crazy landings.
And it's
they play with that.
Yeah, and as they should, because it's such a unique airport. I think what's interesting about it is when you're flying or landing over water and you have only water in front of you as a visual reference, pilots can become a little bit disoriented. So some of them come in a little shallow on the glide slope, but if they're familiar with the approach, they know what to look for, and technology's kind of mitigated any issues. But while the landings are spectacular, the takeoffs are also spectacular too. And a lot of people that have watched a plane land will then go up to the fence and hold on to it as they get pummeled with jet blast until they realize that it's excruciating, because they're getting sandblasted at the same time. Now, as this plane takes off on the same runway in which it lands, there is a huge mountain at the end of the runway. So they have to take off, gear up, and then a hard turn to avoid the mountain. So it's not, we shouldn't oversimplify how complicated it is, not only to land, but to take off at this very, very unique airport.
I have a few just to show you how impressive. I don't think there's a video. The Concorde has actually landed.
No way.
Santa Marta. Yes.
Wow.
Even apparently before the runway was extended, I was not able to find any videos. Probably nobody had an iPhone to take a video of the plane. The Antonov AN255 also landed there.
And took off somehow.
And took off somehow. Exactly, somehow. If for those who remember Microsoft Flight Simulator version X, so the 10th version, if you just had the freeware, so the version without having bought the entire game, that was the airport that you could play with. I remember it. That was Juliana Airport. You could actually try to land on there.
What a great way to sell it too. And incredibly, even with all these complications, there have been no major incidents at that airport.
No, correct. Yes. Unlike some of the others you mentioned before, absolutely correct. One last number, maybe. It's an airport that is now there with a new terminal. It's because it's done some expansions, can hold 2.5 million passengers a year, which obviously compared to the other airports we talked about until now is not a lot. But then I'm going to tell you, on this island, there's only 37,000 people living.
Which is it's amazing.
The ratio of the airport compared to the inhabitants is amazing. It's crazy.
It is. And again, a top of my list to go. And if you've been there, I'm very envious of you, but we'd love to hear about if you went down to the beach and what it was like.
Yeah, exactly. To finish this show, there's actually currently a poll where you can vote on your favorite approach on privatefly.com. I'll put the link.
Amazing.
One of which is obviously Juliana Airport. So, guys, we don't have any stake at it, but just go and vote. On that, Alex, from the sunny skies from once in London, and your sunny skies, I hope,
actually,
in California.
From my in-laws' closet, believe it or not.
True. This part of the video this part of the podcast will be videoed on YouTube, guys. I'll put the video of Alex with all the clothes behind him so you'll see. Alex, safe travels because you're coming back to London next week. So we'll have a show where both of us are in the same city. It doesn't happen too often. I'm very much looking forward to that. And on this, thank you.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.
On behalf of Layovers and the entire crew, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing you on board again next week. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.